Here we are with Phil Perry, and there's a mock draft up there, you say, Phil Perry?
It'll be up a little bit later today, yes.
Okay, and you have the Lions taking the quarterback from Alabama, I'm told.
Jalen Milroe.
Right.
I know you don't love that because they have Hendon Hooker already, and maybe he's the next guy. I just think Jared Goff, you know what you have there, and you know it's not enough.
Yeah, I think they like Hendon Hooker. I don't think, and I think they're playing to win now. I'm not positive they take a quarterback in the first round. Yes, Jonathan.
And at the top of the draft, you have an interesting scenario because it's widely thought that Abdul Carter would be there for the Patriots at 4. You say that is not going to happen. Travis Hunter will also be gone at 4.
Yeah, I have both those guys going with the first 2 picks. So, and then a quarterback, Cam Ward, goes at 3, and then you're sort of left to figure out what happens from there. Do you trade down? Do you just take the best offensive lineman available? And so that's what I have them doing.
And the general manager from the Titans has come out and said that you do not pass on an elite talent when you have the number 1 pick in the draft, because he was asked about trading down. He goes, you do not pass on an elite talent. I mean, maybe he's stretching the truth and talking about Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders being elite talents, or maybe
I think the word was generational.
Or generational talent. Right. That's so even more. He said generational talent. So if you're thinking about that, it's the Heisman winner that plays both ways. It would be Travis Hunter. I mean, maybe it's obviously a misdirection. It could be misdirection. It could be anything, but it's not beyond the realm of possibility that they would take Travis Hunter there. If it could be a draft, and we've talked about it with Breer. There's a lot the Desmond Ridder draft. There's drafts where you think that guys are going to go in, that the team desperate for a quarterback is going to take some guy at the top, and then Geno Smith was the first pick in the quarterback taken. He was the second round pick by the Jets. There's just drafts where that doesn't happen. You think that someone's going to get hot on someone, and then they don't.
Kenny Pickett draft a few years ago. He was the first quarterback taken, I think, 20 overall.
Not Desmond Ridder. Kenny Pickett is what I was talking about. Yeah, Kenny Pickett draft. There was a lot of talk of Kenny Pickett. Pitt, right? Yeah, Kenny Pickett coming out and getting being a high draft pick, and then he ended up not being that, and deservedly so. All right, so Josh McDaniels is the offensive coordinator. He was around, and now he's back. It's his 3rd time in that post. What are your feelings on that, Phil Perry?
Yeah, I get your concerns looking at it and saying, well, what has he done outside of his work with Tom Brady? But I do think if you're looking for somebody who can help you hit the ground running.
I'll shut up, but for 5 seconds.
Yes, go ahead.
It's not even concern. It's not just an automatic, this will be good, he's good.
Right. Which I think is fair. I think it's fair. I just would say among your options, right, you're not saying that about anybody in all likelihood in terms of the offensive coordinators available to you. Oh, I know this is going to work out. Did you feel that way about Grant Udinski?
Nope.
The 28-year-old assistant quarterbacks coach in Minnesota?
I didn't think Alex Van Pelt was a disaster.
No. I think given what he had, especially in terms of developing the quarterback, he did what he was expected to do.
Right.
On really important fronts. With Josh McDaniels, to me, the most pertinent years aren't necessarily the Tom Brady years. They are 2020, which was the Cam Newton year, and 2021. And the reason I say that is because 2021, obviously, you had sort of a pared-down version of what was the quote-unquote Brady offense. And he piecemealed it in such a way for Mac Jones, Josh McDaniels did, that it allowed him to, even though things tailed off on the end, he was the runner-up for Offensive Rookie of the Year, and he probably would have been the Rookie of the Year had he been able to maintain his pace through the end of that season. And that was not a talented roster offensively. I mean, your best pass catchers were Jacoby Myers and Hunter Henry. So that, to me, is a pretty good job. 2020, I look at, not because Cam Newton was a good passer, like he was what he was. He was out of the league a year later. But I like that year as a example of Josh McDaniels' strengths, or one of them, which is he can adapt what he does to the people he has. Cam Newton ran the ball 9 times per game last year.
Okay, but
and it was all he could do. I get it, but at least it's in his bag. They weren't even willing to do that this past year with Drake May. You've got a big athletic quarterback who can run in short yardage and red zone situations, and they refused to do it.
Okay, so part of that, I think, is they didn't quite know, and maybe Drake May didn't know what he was going to be capable of, and
that's ridiculous.
What he was.
Well, that's a bad job.
But every team caters their offense to the quarterback.
Not necessarily.
No.
That's every team.
I'm telling you, they just didn't do it this past year because they were a West Coast scheme and they wanted to run West Coast stuff, and that's what they did.
And maybe, I still say they maybe didn't know how good he was going to be with his own legs. And also, they're probably thinking, we don't have anything offensively other than Drake May, and we don't necessarily want to put him out there in space a whole lot and get him killed.
Well, that's true. And that's why that happened. But you just can't live that way. It's 2025 in the NFL.
And also in short yardage, I would contend that he's not going to get hurt. Like if you're just going to use him in short yardage situations, I would think that's the least likely time that you're going to get hurt.
I just think his offense is adaptable, and we saw it even with Brady. The quote-unquote Tom Brady offense was many different things over the years. Now, you can do that because you have Tom Brady, but they were a spread offense in 2007, and they lit the league on fire. They were two tight end offense in 2011. They were a two-back offense in 2018 and won a Super Bowl. So they could go shotgun, they could go under center, they could run zone, they could run quote-unquote gap schemes. Like, they did a little bit of everything. Josh McDaniels' offense is not one specific thing. I think he gets sort of pigeonholed as a guy who's, well, he's going to work well with a drop-back passer who's just going to operate from right behind center, and he's going to be kind of old school in that way. And I just don't think that's the case. I think he's willing to be more flexible than that.
Why did no one else want him?
Is that what happened?
Well, I mean, he
got fired as a head coach. He was making a lot of money. He was here. My understanding is he would have had interest in some other offensive coordinator jobs, including maybe for the Lions, once those people parted with their offensive coordinators.
Okay,
so Buffalo and Joe Brady, if he gets a head coaching job somewhere, maybe he ends up in Buffalo.
Okay,
maybe he ends up in Detroit.
You just didn't hear his name. I mean, it wasn't being talked about. But you talked to people that said that Josh McDaniels would have.
He's got enough connections. Houston's another one. If Bobby Slowick ever gets a head coaching job, like he is a very well respected offensive coordinator in the NFL.
You just didn't hear his name being bandied about.
I think people have reported it actually that he would have had it. I think Bert. I don't know if you had him in this week,
but who reads it? So many words.
Yeah,
I mean, it's Sports
He's
Illustrated.
Prolific.
You got to pack a lunch.
Yeah, let's not go crazy.
I think Bert has put some of that stuff out there, so I think he would have had some interest. I think this is a job.
You think he would have gotten a job?
I think he had his choice of job. If you're making whatever he was making from the Raiders, like you're not just jumping at whatever job comes to you.
Because that was like a question I had. And I was wrong, so that's good to know. All right, so that is wrong. Did you think that they had to hire Vrabel so quickly? This is just curiosity. It's not that they did anything wrong. I am curious though. Like they jumped on
Vrabel or McDaniels?
Vrabel.
Okay.
Now I'm talking about Vrabel.
Yeah.
I obviously they didn't have to. I mean, they wanted McDaniels and they got McDaniels, and that's how it goes. But it doesn't seem like they rushed into McDaniels. They wanted McDaniels. You know who you want. And it's better than the alternative of interviewing 700 guys and getting the 700th guy, like what happened with Gerard Mayo. I'm not complaining about that. And I'm not even really complaining about how fast they hired Vrabel. I'm just interested in from what you heard. Like, say the Patriots did a real search, like a quote-unquote real search, where they interviewed 6 head coaching candidates. They interviewed Vrabel, and he left, and, a couple days went by, and they interviewed some more guys. Do you think that there was a danger of Vrabel being picked up during those couple days?
No, I don't. I think he wanted them as much as they wanted him. So while Vrabel had a ton of leverage, like he was the guy for the Patriots, he could have asked for the moon from the Patriots, and I think they kind of have given him that to some degree. The Patriots also represented the best job in a lot of ways. You talk to people that are in these cycles, whether it's offensive coordinator or head coach, they look at a team that has a quarterback and has a lot of resources to spend to make the roster better, even though the roster stinks.
They were clearly number one, and here's
they
why.
Were the best job.
Jacksonville, it was bandied about Jacksonville or the Patriots as the best job. This is how much everyone knows. Jacksonville can't get the FNOC from Tampa to come in there.
I know.
And then the idiot owner, Ron Jeremy, has to fire the GM
Balky.
4 years into because of Cousin Larry, I blame.
But I think what Fred wants to know is, were there other teams that were hot on Vrabel that would have
would have pounced, though?
I think there were other teams that were definitely hot on
Do you think
him.
the Jets really wanted Vrabel?
Yeah.
Okay, you do. You think they wanted him over Aaron Glenn?
I think so. I think they would have taken him.
And by the way, Fred, I was thinking about this.
You have not. You've talked to people that think.
No,
that?
I mean, I'm guessing, but
because I think that they knew that they wanted Aaron Glenn
because Aaron Glenn was a Jet.
No one cares.
No one cares.
But here's the deal: is that he wanted the job. He represented something to the organization. They're an organization that is being killed and being called like a clown show, and no one would want to work for him. So they get a guy who played for them, who that's the job he wanted. He wanted the New York market, establishing a culture of literally, it's like Little League, like establishing a culture of like, I want to be here. I succeeded here. I went to AFC Championship game here. Like, it can be done.
If Vrabel had expressed that, though, don't you think they would have taken him? He represents a lot of the same stuff. Culture guy, defensive guy, winning background.
Yeah, I think
culture.
Vrabel is a better candidate for a head coach than Aaron Glenn based on his bona fides. And if I was any other team, I'd want Vrabel over Aaron Glenn. What do I know about who's going to be a good coach? I don't.
Okay, but
I know why they wanted Aaron Glenn, though.
Okay,
and it makes sense logically.
Vrabel after Ben Johnson, for some teams, if not ahead of Ben Johnson, was considered one of the top two guys.
We just talked to Dave Richard, who thinks Aaron Glenn ahead of Ben Johnson. Go ahead.
But I think just in terms of comparing the two, between what the Patriots did and the Jets did, they're very similar.
Mm-hmm.
The Patriots and the Jets both had their minds made up as to who they wanted to be the head coach before they did any kind of a real search, and it just so happened that who they wanted also wanted that job.
But the Jets interviewed 15 people. Like, they interviewed everybody, including Vrabel.
How many did the Patriots interview for the head coaching job, Phil?
Was it 4?
3.
I think it was two
No,
before.
It was 4.
Four.
They had two minority candidates.
They interviewed 2 black guys, Johnson
and Vrabel.
Yeah,
it was 4.
Yeah, they interviewed
I'm
the
taking Vrabel out of this because they really didn't need to interview him.
Whatever,
But
fine.
it's
Yeah,
three.
they
Three-
interviewed.
three real ones.
They made a joke of the Rooney Rule, and then they interviewed Ben Johnson probably just to see what was going on.
It is a much different scenario, and felt we.
Do you think Ben Johnson would have taken the Patriots job?
I think he was genuinely interested. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
Drake May is sort of the prize. If you're a
No, I
coach
get it.
in this cycle,
I think the
they
Patriots
had
was the
something that
best
other
job.
teams didn't have. Yeah.
I think the Patriots is the best job. They have the best ownership. They have the best. They have an elite young quarterback, and that's what you would want. Absolutely.
I think Ben Johnson knew, though, as he was interviewing, that Mike Vrabel was their top choice.
You go after Mike Vrabel.
And so it was
not
just sort of a
before.
just in case.
Yeah.
But to answer your initial question, Fred, they did not have to rush, and they didn't have to rush with McDaniels.
No, I know they didn't
They
have to
just
rush.
have. They seem to have very little time for quote unquote the process, and so if it doesn't work out, that's where you come back and you say, could you not have done more? And that's where they open themselves up to criticism.
Thank you. Oh, wow. That's exactly what I've been saying. I've been saying this is all great, but if you don't now markedly improve, and Drake May doesn't keep this ascension, C.J. Stroud, second year, it's not a guarantee.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you don't keep your ascension and you're not we've talked about this, realistically in the mix for a playoff spot in December, then you're up. There's going to be criticism. And, in the division, you got to watch the Jets. Like, what if you're worse than the Jets? What if you're worse than Chicago? Chicago's really the team to keep an eye on, because what if Ben Johnson goes out there, Caleb Williams lights the world on fire? I understand Chicago's got much better weapons. The offensive line is supposedly not so great there either. But, say Caleb Williams catches fire and the Bears make a playoff run. This is all going to the rushing, I think, will come back to haunt them. But we're hypothetically giving them a negative thing, which is unfair because it could turn out to be great.
Right, and they could have gone through the process and interviewed 12 guys at both offensive coordinator and head coach and still ended up with the guys that they had.
I would have preferred
that. But then at least they did due diligence.
Correct.
That.
Like, they didn't flip out and they fire their coach right after a game and then go, and then grab Vrabel.
But then leave it to us. We'd sit here and say, thanks for wasting everybody's time. You just ended up hiring who you were going to hire the whole time.
No, I swear to God, I wouldn't have done that.
No,
I would have thought good for them.
If anything, the Crafts needed to self-scout their organization and how they do things, and they didn't do it.
Sometimes the one thing, I will say this, the one thing that can help in terms of settling on these two jobs relatively early, is that it does help you fill out the rest of your staff. If you're like the Raiders right now, you still don't have a head coach, or you're the Jaguars, you still don't have a head coach, and it might take you another week to get that. Well, like now as you go down the line, it's just taking you longer and longer to pluck these people that you want.
But Phil, those jobs are like the Patriots job last year. Like we didn't know Jacksonville was like that. But say what you will about the Jets organization. Vegas is a disaster, and the idea that that because Tom Brady's a minority owner, they were going to get an elite coaching candidate is a joke. The Patriots are in a way better position. We just discussed it. The Patriots was the job. I agree with you. It's the job. Best ownership, best quarterback, given the scenario. Caleb Williams might be a better quarterback, but who knows? It's certainly better this year. So you were never going to be in the position of Jacksonville or Las Vegas in my mind, which is another reason I think the Jets went with Aaron Glenn, is because they didn't want to screw around, and they liked them and they didn't want to screw around. But they did interview 15 people, so I'm not contradicting myself, and they didn't want to.
And they had to wait to some. They had to wait to some degree with him because his team was.
And they
still
also
playing.
did fire their coach during the season and could interview during, they interviewed Ron Rivera. I think maybe even during the season they interviewed.
Mike
Ron Rivera.
Vrabel was during the season. It was
Yeah.
Right at the
So
end of
they
the
interviewed
year.
some guys.
And I like Aaron Glenn. I think he's got a chance. I like the cut of his jib.
I know why they hired him. That's all. I know it makes logical sense. Is he going to be a good head coach? What the hell do I know? I don't know the guy. And I could see why for Brian Hoyer it would be annoying when people are talking about Josh McDaniels, because Hoyer's like, I know the guy and he's like my best friend and da-da-da.
And he's been around a lot of different players. I give his words a lot of weight.
Certainly,
I know he's
but
biased
he's a little
to
too
a degree.
close.
He's biased to a degree, but he's seen a lot of different coaches.
He knows Josh
and
McDaniels.
So he knows who's smart.
Better than anybody. But he also knows him better than anybody, if that makes any sense.
I get what you're saying. I do.
All right. There you go.